it's going to come down to the point, which is the apex. The pericardial sac, that's next on your list, all right? This heart does not have the pericardial sac intact, but I don't know if any of you guys remember, some of the cats actually do, so that's going to be that outer casing of the heart, all right? So that's sort of what keeps fluid between the sac and the heart to sort of make it frictionless. It's not, of course, going to be frictionless, but its job is to reduce the friction so that the heart can function properly. All right, the epicardium, all right, so that's also called the visceral pericardium. If you guys remember previously from digestion and respiration, we had visceral peritoneums, all right? And so that's going to be sort of the actual organ. So what I'm touching right here is actually the visceral layer, all right? So that's the pericardium, but it's also called the epicardium. So whichever one you want to write on your exam will work, all right? So again, this is epicardium.
Just flip it
so
up.
if you guys open up the heart, I don't know how many of you can see it, but can you guys see this really fine white line down here?
Yes.
So if you follow that, that actually wraps all the way around the heart. So this outer white layer right there, that's going to be the epicardium. So you can see some of the epicardium coming off right here. All right, and there's some more over here. All right, so it's just that layer that sort of surrounds the outside of the heart. So there are three layers. That's the outermost one, the epicardium. The middle one is going to be the myocardium. So that's going to be sort of the bulk muscle part of the heart. So this right here, this is all myocardium. All of this in here, this is all myocardium. So it's going to be that thick middle part of the heart, so the actual muscle. And then the endocardium is going to be what lines the inside of the heart, so inside the chambers. If you guys can see this, I'm trying to find a good one on the projector. So you guys see this white line going down here? So this is going to be the endocardium. So that's going to be the membrane lining the chambers like the ventricles and the atria. So remember, epicardium is going to be on the outside here, that white line, and the endocardium is going to be on the inside. And then between the two, this thick layer is all myocardium. All right, next on your list is going to be the interventricular groove. So on this heart, you can kind of see a groove going down here where I'm outlining it. Can everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's going to be the interventricular groove, and as the name sort of suggests, it's between the ventricles. You can see that it kind of goes off to the side there, and if you lift this, you'll see that it doesn't exactly match the ventricles, but it's pretty close. All right, so that's where we get the name from. It's just the groove that lies between the ventricles, and you can see that from the outside. Next on the list is going to be the left and the right atria. All right, so you need to also figure out what is the front and back of the heart so that you know what's the left and the right side of the heart. Does anyone know if we're looking at the front or the back of the heart here?
The front.
Right, so this is the front. All right, the main way that you can tell the front from the back is this really large pulmonary trunk right here. All right, so that's always going to sort of come down diagonally right to the front of the heart. And we'll get back into the function of all these when we go through the circulation. All right, also if you flip it over and look at the back, it looks like a big mess. All right, so you're going to have a bunch of pulmonary veins over here. You're going to have your inferior vena cava coming in over here, and your superior will be somewhere up here. So that's one way to tell the front from the back. All right, so there are going to be a lot of openings for really large blood vessels in the back of the heart. All right, so if we flip it back over, again, we're going for the left and the right atrium, so we know that this is the front, all right? However, if we open it, all right, now this is sort of the middle of the heart. So does anyone know what is the left and the right side?
The actual left and
side
right.
is always going to have the larger ventricle. All right, so this will be the left side, and this is the right. Also, if you look at the wall of the myocardium, so this compared to over here, you can see that it's a lot thicker for the left ventricle. Does anyone know why that might be?
That's where blood comes in?
So it's actually where blood goes out.
Drunk.
All right, and we'll go over that again in just a little bit. But the reason why this is so thick is because the blood from the ventricle here is being forced and pumped through the aorta. And so there's a lot of force involved with that. And that's why you generally see a lot thicker muscle lining the left ventricle. But again, the atria, all right, so the atria is where blood comes into the heart, all right, whether it's from deoxygenated tissue or if it's coming from the lungs and it's freshly oxygenated. The atria are going to be towards the top here, all right, so this one's a little bit difficult to see, but the atrium here is going to be right here. So the one way to find the atria is to find these valves. So can everyone see this white kind of sheet-like material here? All right, so that's going to actually be the bicuspid valve. And so you can also see these structures, which we'll go over in just a second, that are called commonly the heart strings. So if you can find this valve right here, on one side it's going to be the atrium, and then on the other side it's going to be the ventricle. So that's sort of one landmark to find the difference between the two chambers. All right, this one isn't dissected super well, so this is basically all ventricle. All right, you'll notice you don't see the valve over there anywhere. So the valve on this side would be the tricuspid valve, and then this one is the bicuspid valve. I'll see if this heart maybe has a better example. So this heart, it's about the same, so it's cut pretty high. So it's really hard to see that right atrium. But nonetheless, you can see the valve right here. All right, so the atrium is going to be just on this side of the valve up here. All right, so we just went the left and the right atria. All right, so remember this is the left side, that's the right. And so underneath the atria, on the other side of these valves, are going to be the ventricles. All right, so remember this is the left atrium, and then below it, this large open space here, that's going to be the left ventricle. And then what would this be over here?
Right ventricle.
Yep, that's the right ventricle. Right. The next on the list are the tricuspid and bicuspid valves, so we just went over those. The tricuspid would be on the right side over here if it was dissected right. Over here, the left one, this is going to be the bicuspid, tricuspid's over here. So remember, tri is going to be on the right, and bicuspid is going to be on the left. All right. Next on the list, you have another series of valves. So you have the pulmonary semilunar valve and the aortic semilunar valve. Those are a little bit more difficult to see on here. All right, can everyone see these valves right here? So this right here, it's semilunar, so that's where it gets that sort of crescent shape from. All right, that's where the name comes from. So this is going to be the semilunar aortic valve. So this right here is going into the aorta. The pulmonary one is usually the hardest to find. We won't be able to see it on this heart. See if I can find it on here. Yeah, so this heart, you won't be able to see it on the camera because you're going to have to look down it, but you can see it on here. See if we can catch any glimpse of it on the camera though. All right, so the aorta, or the atria, is going to be over here, and the pulmonary trunk is going to be coming up from this direction. So you're going to have to look in here for the pulmonary semilunar valves. Again, if we flip it onto the front, all right, this cut open right here is the pulmonary trunk. So if you look into there, it's kind of hard to see. See if I can get a better view. But way down here, it's going to be pretty dark. You can see a little bit of it right here, that white line. That's part of that pulmonary semilunar valve. This is just going to be one of the structures that you're going to have to actually look at a heart in front of you to find this. We do have a few in there that should have it dissected out, so when we pull out the hearts, I'll make note for you guys when we find a good one that's sort of right open for you. All right, next on the list is going to be the chordae tendineae, so that's what we refer to as the heart strings. All right, so these are going to be the chordae tendineae. The other side here, if you dissected it and you could see the valve, you would see a similar thing just on the other side. I think you could see it on this other heart a little bit. But anyways, these strings are called the chordae tendineae, and they're attached at the base down here to the papillary muscle. All right. So on one end of the chordae tendineae, you have the valve. All right. So the bicuspid valve here, for example, and then on one end you have the papillary muscle. So the papillary muscle, that would be the next bullet point on the list. Next on the list is going to be the interventricular septum. All right, so where do you think we might find that based on the name? So it's between the ventricles, all right, so it's interventricular, and a septum is just a structure that divides things. So it's going to be this right here. So we also went over that, what is this made up of?
Muscle?
So it's muscle, but what do we call it specifically, this middle layer?
Myocardium?
Yeah, so this is all myocardium here. All right, so on the exam, I always want you to be as specific as possible. So if I put a pin here, I don't want myocardium, even though it would technically be right. This specific structure is going to be the interventricular septum. So it's kind of this structure here that divides the two ventricles, all right? Again, when I say be as specific as possible, you could put myocardium of interventricular septum if you really aren't sure, and that will get you full points. But if I pointed to myocardium, I would either put something here or over here. All right, so just remember, if it's in this middle part, it's always going to be the interventricular septum.
All right, bet.
Next on the list is the superior vena cava. All right, so this is where blood from your tissues all around your thoracic cavity goes back into the heart. All right, so you have an inferior and a superior vena cava. One's coming back into the top of your heart, and the other one's coming from the bottom, from your abdominal cavity. So the superior is going to be everything, all the venous blood that's coming from your thoracic cavity. So that's going to be going up from the top into the top of the heart. So let's see here. It's kind of blurry. Can everyone see this right here? So this right here is going to be the superior vena cava. All right, so the way that we're looking at it, this side right here is the front of the heart, and this would be the back side right here. All right, so looking down, you can see the superior, and then on the back of the heart, sort of just below it, can everyone see that opening right there? So that's the inferior vena cava. So this is where blood is coming back to your heart from your abdominal cavity. So because this is the back side of the heart that we're looking at right here, all right, you're going to have a really large inferior vena cava that's going to be coming up from your abdominal cavity, and it goes all the way up the back of your heart and in right there. So that's just where we decided to cut that. So next on your list is the coronary sinus. So this is going to be sort of a bulging vein that's actually on the back of your heart. So everyone knows and understands that the heart sends out blood to the rest of your tissue because it needs nutrients and things like oxygen, right? But what very few people actually think about is that the heart itself needs to deliver itself blood. It's sort of a common misconception that because the heart is filled with blood, it can just sort of pull that blood out. But you wouldn't want to do that, because if the heart is taking blood out from its own ventricles, you're eliminating blood that could be sent to other important tissues. So the way that the heart gives itself blood is it has its own little circulation system that just surrounds the heart.
That's cool.
And so when it pumps blood out through the aorta, all right, so if we flip this back over, when blood gets sent out through the aorta, so that's that really large branch that's next to the pulmonary trunk, all right? So the aorta is going to be this part here. Everyone can see it. All right, and this line right here in front of it is the pulmonary trunk. So we can turn that back around. All right, everyone see that? So you have this pulmonary trunk coming in front of the aorta, which is right here. So if we open this heart again, all right, so remember that the left ventricle, all right, is right here, and it sends blood out this way, which goes out through the aorta, which forms sort of an arch on top of the heart. All right, so what happens when the heart is sending blood to itself is it pumps blood through the aorta, and then on the aortic arch, so again, it's going to be an arch that's sort of on the top of the heart. You can see that we kind of cut that arch a little bit in half. It will send one branch of that aorta to go around itself, all right? And so the very first branches off the aorta that are going to surround the heart, those are going to be the coronary arteries. So how many of you guys have heard of things like a heart attack or a myocardial infarction or anything like that? So that's going to be due to things like these coronary arteries being blocked, all right? And after the heart delivers blood to itself, what do you think has to happen to the resulting deoxygenated blood? So it needs to get oxygen again, right? How is it going to do that? Where does it need to go? Right, it has to go back to the lungs. So when the blood is delivered to all the heart tissue, all right, so when you look at a 3D model of the heart, you see all these arteries going to the heart itself that sort of surround the heart and go down. All right, as the blood is flowing around the heart, it's getting rid of its oxygen. So when it gets to the bottom, it's going to be sort of filled with deoxygenated blood. Those veins just follow the same paths right next to the arteries all the way back up the heart. And the coronary sinus is going to be, it's pretty hard to see in a lot of these hearts because the veins and arteries, a lot of them have been removed. But this really sort of open groove right here on the back of the heart, that's going to be the coronary sinus. So that's where all the venous blood that the heart sort of fed itself is coming back to the heart that's deoxygenated, and it's pooling in that region right there. So that's called the coronary sinus. This is blood this is venous blood, so it's deoxygenated, and this is from the heart that was sort of giving itself blood. So this is from the heart's own circulatory system. 3 more things left on this list, all right? So the next one is the pulmonary trunk. That's one we've sort of mentioned a few times by now. So the pulmonary trunk, remember, is going to be this piece right here that goes right towards the front of the heart. So this is one key character for you guys to find the front versus the back of the heart. And the pulmonary trunk, all right, when we go over circulation, you'll find this out a little bit more, or it'll be more clear to you. But again, we can't really see the atria very well, so it's kind of right up here. So blood from the body, from the superior and inferior vena cava, go into the right atrium, all right? That blood is then pumped into the right ventricle, and then that blood is then sent through the pulmonary trunk, all right? So remember, the other side, it's going through the aorta. On the right side, you're sending deoxygenated blood through the pulmonary trunk, all right? So if I close this, that deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart is being sent out this way, and then this branches both ways and it goes to either lung, all right? So that's how deoxygenated blood is sent to the lungs. And then when blood comes back from the lungs, it goes through the pulmonary veins on the back of the heart right here. All right, and does anyone know where these empty into? So this is where you have to kind of start keeping the front and the back of the heart sort of straight. All right, so we're looking at what side of the heart?
The back?
The back, all right, so this should be the right, this should be the left side of the heart. So where do you think blood that's going in through these pulmonary veins is emptying into? So it's going to be the left something, all right? So it's going to be the atrium or the ventricle. Which one do you think it is?
Ventricle.
So it's going to be the atrium. So remember, the atrium always receives blood, and then the ventricles are what ultimately pump the blood out. All right, so remember, this is right here, the inferior vena cava. The superior was up top there. So remember, those are getting blood, deoxygenated blood from your tissue. That's all going into the right atrium. All right, so after your heart sends out deoxygenated blood to the lungs, the lungs oxygenate the blood, and that oxygenated blood goes back here through the pulmonary veins. So when these enter the left atrium, which is just behind this right here, you're going to have freshly oxygenated blood in your left atrium. All right, where do you think it goes after the atrium?
The ventricle.
Right, so it goes through that valve, all right, so it goes through the bicuspid valve on the left side into the left ventricle. So remember, this is all oxygenated blood now. And then where does it go after the left ventricle? Right, so I heard someone say it goes through the aorta, all right? So remember, the right side, it takes deoxygenated blood